Most retirement planning focuses on building wealth. Very little of it focuses on protecting it when you're no longer able to make good decisions for yourself. Today, we're tackling one of the most important and avoided conversations in retirement. What actually happens to your finances when cognitive decline, illness, or age make managing money impossible? And more importantly, what can you do right now to make sure your family never has to find out the hard way? All right, welcome everyone to the Capitalist Investor. As always, you have me, Diamond Hands D, and back again this week is Sam and Jack. How we doing, guys?
Doing great.
Hey, glad to be here.
Yep, you guys seem real excited about it. All right, well, we had a good topic last week, and this week is definitely a topic that needs to be discussed. And I would say probably, one of the, it's not a comfortable situation to talk about. So, it's one that is, often avoided. And it's basically, what happens if, as you get older in age, if you can't handle or can't physically do it anymore, the handling of your finances. So, maybe I'll kick things off with kind of this question. How common of a problem is this? Is it a small percentage over a small amount of time, or is everyone going to face this? Just some of the numbers before we get into it. Roughly 1 in 3 people over 85 have some form of dementia. So 1 in 3. Average retirement now lasts between 20 and 25 years. So cognitive decline is probably going to happen at some point. And just dealing with people's retirements and families over the years, it is a key concern for a lot of people, which is why one of the reasons why you hire an advisor. And then another thing not comfortable to talk about is as you're getting older, you may not be making the best decisions, right? So the last thing that you want to have happen is, have a successful retirement, after building your wealth and your family and all that, and then, start to make poor decisions at the end that could affect you. So Sam, I'll kick things off with you. What are the kind of the essential documents that every retiree needs, and what happens without them?
Right. Yeah. So, first document that comes to mind, that durable power of attorney, right?
Yep.
So, single most critical document, but you also have to be conscious, right? This has to be created while still legally competent, right? So, it's not something you should be pushing off, but essentially it's just list out who can act in your interest, even if your cognitive ability starts to slip a little bit, right? So kind of to your point, the decision-making isn't all there anymore, right? So it's nice to have someone in your corner kind of helping you out. Trusted contact designation, also an important one. Largely unknown, but, it takes only like 5-10 minutes to set up, and it can serve as early warning system, especially if there are kind of concerns of fraud or exploitation, right? You tend to see that a lot with people of older age, especially once they start to slip a little bit, easier to take advantage of.
Yeah,
right?
no doubt.
Revocable living trust, another important one there, super valuable when it comes to complex estates, owning multiple properties, or if you have some blended families, right? But it also still gives you control at the end of the day of your assets while they're still within the trust. Healthcare proxy and financial power of attorney, important ones as well. So separate documents for separate purposes, right? But essentially gives someone the right to make health decisions, financial decisions on your behalf. But without them, your family will have to deal with court proceedings that, get expensive. They take a whole lot of time and all public record.
Yeah. So, speaking of uncomfortable situations, I remember when I'm the oldest child. So like if my parents would go like on a trip without us, obviously didn't happen very often, but maybe like a wedding or something, being the oldest, my dad would say, hey, like something happens to us, here's where all the papers are, right? So again, that's not what you want to hear when you're in high school, but at the same point in time, it's probably a pretty good thing that I knew where they were just in case, and I knew who to call. And I had, obviously I was young at the time when I was, in this story time frame, but it's something that you have to do, and so sure. That's why we're talking about it here. So, Jack, when do you think is the ideal time to get this started?
Well, I think for a lot of people, the moment that you think you might need them is often already too late. There's a lot of legal work that goes into them. There's a lot of sort of background that goes into making these documents. So you want to get ahead of this. And I think for a lot of people, the Goldilocks zone is probably 55 to 70. Yeah. Just because it's at that point in your life stage, it still doesn't feel real yet. It still feels like a hypothetical. And so that way you can make sort of better decisions doing that. The urgency isn't there. You have time to put this in place. So you want to give yourself a nice little buffer. And I think, that 55 to 70 range is a pretty good one. And it's often just the paradox of planning. It's the people who need them the most often don't have them in place because it never felt urgent. And as soon as, something happens, you're unprepared, and it can lead to a messy situation.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, when I'd say this is a good topic in general, just because when someone when I'm meeting someone, maybe it's just like casually at a party or something like that, and we talk about what we do for a living. The first question that I always get is like, what's the hot stock out there? What's crypto gonna do? Should I be buying, investment related questions, right? And the things that we talked about last week and this week as well might not be investment related, but they are critically essential to planning your retirement. So understanding there's much more to retirement planning than just investments. I think just putting that out there for people to hear is really important. So because what you said there, Jack, the planning paradox, that's what happens, right? The people that need the stuff don't have it, right? Yeah. So and when you need it and think about it, it could already be too late. So these conversations are not fun, but conversations that should be had with your family, no doubt. So so Sam, let's beyond the legal documents, what if someone's out there listening, and they're like, man, shoot, I should really start looking into this. Where should they start beyond just the legal documents?
Right. Well, one thing that I think is super easy is just set up a beneficiary on your account, right? Yeah. I mean, that takes, just a few minutes. I know when I used to have clients come in at the bank, that was like one of the first things I would flag. If they came and sat down and was like, hey, you don't have anyone listed here. You really want this to have to go through probate if anything were to happen, right? So pretty simple there, right? But consolidating accounts, also a big one. It's nice to get everything under one roof. The average American has anywhere from like 4 to 7 accounts spread across multiple institutions. So keeping things simple, knowing where everything is, it makes things a whole lot simpler.
Yep.
Create a financial inventory document, right? They're kind of to your point, parents leave for some travel. Right. They say, hey, maybe there's this brown accordion folder in the bottom drawer, like it has everything you'd need. But yeah, if you list out every account, every login, any insurance policies, advisor contacts, automatic payments, having that all in one place, it's easier for your family to understand what you have and where it all is located, right? Automate the right bills. So just setting up automatic bill payments is great. Eliminates the potential for any sort of missed payments, any penalties you might face for that if your cognitive ability starts to slip. But at the same time, too, you want to kind of review your auto transfers, right? I mean, these are regularly used by scammers to funnel money out of your account. So kind of being aware of the activity that's going on in your account is definitely important, too.
Yeah. So, you mentioned something there. Again, not a fun topic to talk about, but people taking advantage of the elderly is a is a major issue. It's estimated $28 billion in the U.S. Annually is exploited, and a large majority of it goes unreported. So, you talk about a family and retirement planning and things like that. As people get older, you have to realize that you need someone in your corner to look out for you, I think is the easiest way to say it. And by the time they need it, it's definitely too late. You're not going to want to have these conversations for the first time as someone is, starting to slip a little bit mentally. So it's a huge issue. I get phone calls, I don't want to say all the time, but I do get them fairly regularly, and it's usually financially related. It's never from like Schwab or anything like that, but it's like Apple IDs seem to be a big one that I get phone calls on. So it's like, no, that is a scam. Do not do that. Right. But not everyone knows, and especially in that age group. So something that you should definitely be talking about with your family, with your advisor on how all of that is going to work. And yeah, this last section here. So the single most important piece of advice, who hasn't done any of this yet, I'd say probably estate planning attorney, and getting at least the big four down. So that's like the will, living will, durable power of attorney, and healthcare power of attorney. So that's kind of what we call like the basic suite of estate planning documents, kind of the bare minimum, if you will, that everyone should have. But as you get into that process, you'll see that that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg as far as estate planning can go. Sam mentioned it on the beneficiary designations. That's a huge one, to make sure you have that in line. So I would say most people most people out there listening, the big four estate planning documents, along with making sure your beneficiaries are correct, is probably a great place to start. And then depending on your wishes, your needs, all that good stuff, you can kind of go up from there. So yeah, what do you guys think? What are your kind of key takeaways from this one?
I mean, one of my key takeaways is it seems like the window to act is now. Legal documents can only be created while someone is competent. So yep. Don't wait until waiting is like the single biggest mistake families can make. So don't wait on it. Do it while you're competent. That's what I kind of took away.
Yeah, for me, it's just make things as simple as possible, right? I mean, obviously, when a family member passes away, it can be a very emotional time, right? There's a lot of moving pieces. The last thing you want to have them there is having to track down all your miscellaneous accounts that are spread across everywhere, right? I mean, I've seen this, that could last for years, right? Uncovering accounts that people may not know they had. So if you act now, make things simple, it only helps them in the long run.
Yep, for sure. And, I'll throw in again, make sure you have a plan for, someone watching out for you, making sure you're not getting taken advantage of. That is a huge risk, maybe even a bigger risk than market loss, for older retirees. And yeah, just talk about it. I would say, sometimes I equate coming in to see us as like going in to see the doctor, right? And that's for your annual physical or whatever, right? So that's not the most fun. Talking about these things are not the most fun either. However, it's a critical part to your overall financial plan, and your overall financial success, as well as making sure your assets pass down to where you want them to go. So, guys, thanks for jumping in and joining us for the last couple weeks. I appreciate that.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, glad to have you guys on. And thanks for listening out there. If you guys have any questions, comments, ideas for a show, questions about your own finances, hit us up at info@swpconnected.com, and we'll talk to you next week.
The opinions expressed in the podcast are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any investment, legal, financial, or tax strategy. It is only intended to provide education about the financial industry. Please consult a qualified professional about your individual needs.